Marcus wiped grease from his hands with a worn rag, the familiar smell of engine oil and metal shavings filling his nostrils. His small repair shop sat on the edge of New Terra Colony, where the city lights faded into darkness. Most folks had gone to sleep hours ago, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to close up. Sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant seeing Sarah's face again. The baby monitor crackled softly from the workbench. Little Emma was finally sleeping after another difficult night. At 8 months old, she seemed to sense something was missing from their world. Marcus knew exactly what that something was. A strange sound echoed from outside, something between wind and thunder, but different. The metal walls of his shop vibrated slightly. Marcus frowned and stepped toward the large bay doors. Living on the frontier meant staying alert for dangerous wildlife or equipment failures that could kill a person in seconds. He pressed the door control, and the heavy panels slid upward with a mechanical groan. Cool night air rushed in, carrying unfamiliar scents. Marcus stepped outside and looked up at the star-filled sky. 3 moons hung overhead, casting silver light across the rocky landscape. Then he saw her. A figure descended from the darkness above, massive wings beating slowly against the night air. Not mechanical wings like the cargo haulers used, but organic ones covered in dark scales that caught the moonlight. As she landed in the open space before his shop, Marcus got his first clear look at what had arrived. She was definitely female, standing nearly 7 feet tall with a powerful build. Her skin had a bronze tint with patches of dark scales along her arms and neck. 2 curved horns emerged from her forehead, and her eyes glowed with a soft amber light in the darkness. Most striking were the wings, easily 20 feet across when fully extended, now folding neatly against her back. Marcus had heard stories about the Draconic Confederation, but no dragonfolk had ever visited New Terra Colony. Their species kept to themselves in the core systems, apparently considering humans too primitive for meaningful contact. The dragon woman looked around the repair shop with obvious interest. Her gaze settled on Marcus, who suddenly felt very aware that he was holding a grease-stained rag and probably smelled like he'd been wrestling with broken machinery all day. "Are you the proprietor of this establishment?" she asked. Her voice was deeper than a human woman's, with an odd harmonic quality that made the words seem to resonate in his chest. "That's me," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Marcus Chen. This is Chen's Repair and Fabrication, though I have to say we don't usually get customers arriving by air at this hour." The dragon woman tilted her head slightly, studying him with those glowing eyes. "I am Caraxus of the Ember Clan. I have traveled far seeking employment opportunities. Your establishment appeared to be the only one with lights still functioning at this hour." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Employment? You're looking for a job?" "That is correct. I possess extensive knowledge of mechanical systems, metallurgy, and fabrication techniques. I am particularly skilled with high-temperature applications and precision metalwork." Before Marcus could respond, the baby monitor on his workbench crackled to life with Emma's crying. The sound carried clearly in the night air, and he saw Caraxus's expression change. Her glowing eyes widened slightly and her head turned toward the shop entrance. "Excuse me," Marcus said, stepping quickly toward the workbench. Emma's cries were getting louder, the kind that meant she was really upset about something. He scooped up the monitor and hurried to the small living area he'd built behind the main shop. Emma was standing in her crib, tiny fists gripping the rails as tears ran down her red cheeks. The moment she saw Marcus, she reached for him with desperate urgency. "Hey there, little star," he murmured, lifting her into his arms. "What's got you so worked up? Bad dream?" Emma buried her face against his shoulder, her crying gradually subsiding into hiccups and sniffles. Marcus rubbed her back gently, swaying slightly in the way that usually calmed her down. After a few minutes, she lifted her head and looked around with curious eyes. When Marcus returned to the main shop, he found Caraxus standing exactly where he'd left her. She hadn't moved to explore or examine his equipment, which showed more restraint than most visitors demonstrated. "I apologize for the interruption," Marcus said, adjusting Emma's position in his arms. "This is Emma. She's been having trouble sleeping since—" He paused, not sure how to explain Sarah's death to a stranger. "Since her mother passed away 3 months ago." Caraxus's expression softened noticeably. "My condolences for your loss." Raising young offspring alone is a significant challenge among any species. Emma had spotted the dragon woman and was staring with wide eyes. Most babies would have been frightened by Kyraxis's appearance, but Emma seemed fascinated. She made a soft cooing sound and reached one small hand toward the glowing amber eyes. She seems unafraid, Kyraxis observed with what might have been surprise. Emma's always been good with new people, Marcus said, though you're definitely the most interesting new person we've met. A small smile appeared on Kyraxis's scaled features. Human infants are considerably smaller than I expected. Our hatchlings emerge much larger. How much larger? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. Approximately the size of your young adult humans. We develop differently. Emma suddenly made an excited babbling sound and leaned forward in Marcus's arms, clearly wanting to get closer to Kyraxis. The dragon woman hesitated for a moment, then slowly extended one clawed finger toward the baby. Emma immediately grabbed the finger with both tiny hands, examining the dark scales with intense concentration. She made happy gurgling sounds and tried to put the finger in her mouth, which made Kyraxis pull back gently. She has a strong grip, Kyraxis noted. Comes from her mother's side, Marcus said softly. Sarah was the strongest person I ever knew. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, Emma continuing to reach for Kyraxis while making increasingly determined baby noises. Finally, Marcus looked up at the dragon woman. So you really want a job? I have to warn you, the pay isn't great and the hours are long. Colony life isn't exactly glamorous. Kyraxis straightened slightly. I am not seeking glamour. I require honest work and a place to contribute meaningfully to a community. Mind if I ask why? No offense, but I figured dragonfolk had better opportunities in the core systems. That is a complicated matter, Kyraxis replied carefully. Let us say that I find myself in need of a fresh beginning, far from previous associations. Marcus recognized the tone of someone who'd left painful circumstances behind. He'd heard it in his own voice often enough lately. Well, he said, looking around at his cluttered shop, I could definitely use the help. Fair warning, though. Most of my work involves fixing broken farm equipment and maintenance on the colony's infrastructure. Nothing too exciting. Honest work is never without excitement for those who take pride in their craft, Kyraxis replied. Emma chose that moment to let out a huge yawn, reminding Marcus that it was well past her bedtime. I should get her settled, he said. But if you're serious about this, we can talk more in the morning. There's a boarding house in town, or if you prefer. I require little shelter, Kyraxis said. A place to rest these wings would be sufficient. Marcus looked at the dragon woman standing in his shop doorway, wings folded against her back, amber eyes glowing softly in the dim light. 3 hours ago, his biggest problem had been a temperamental fusion regulator that kept shutting down the colony's main power grid. Now he was apparently considering hiring the first dragonfolk to ever set foot on New Terra Colony. Emma made another sleepy sound and nestled closer to his chest. Sometimes the universe had a strange sense of timing. All right, Marcus said finally. Let's see what tomorrow brings. Marcus woke to the sound of metal being shaped with perfect precision. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. The rhythmic hammering coming from his shop had a quality unlike anything his automated tools could produce. Each strike rang out with musical clarity, creating harmonies that seemed impossible from simple metalwork. Emma was still sleeping peacefully in her crib, tiny fists curled near her face. Marcus pulled on work clothes quietly and made his way to the shop, stopping short when he saw what Kyraxis had accomplished. The dragon woman stood at his forge, wings partially extended for balance as she worked a piece of glowing metal with tools that seemed too small for her clawed hands. But her movements were incredibly precise, each hammer blow landing exactly where intended. The metal sang under her touch, literally producing tonal notes as she shaped it. More impressive was what she'd already finished. Arranged on his workbench were a dozen perfectly crafted components for the fusion regulator that had been giving him trouble for weeks. Each piece was not only functional but beautiful, with flowing curves and subtle decorative elements that somehow enhanced rather than compromised their engineering purpose. Good morning, Kyraxis said without turning from her work. I hope you do not mind that I began without formal authorization. Your fusion regulator required immediate attention. How did you know about the regulator? Marcus asked, moving closer to examine her work. The craftsmanship was beyond anything he'd ever seen. The resonance patterns were obvious once I observed your power distribution system. Humans build functional equipment, but you often overlook harmonic stress factors that lead to premature failure. Marcus picked up one of the components, feeling its perfect weight and balance. This is incredible work. How long have you been at this? Approximately 4 hours. Dragonfolk require less rest than humans. 4 hours? Marcus stared at the array of finished parts. This would have taken me 3 days, assuming I could even achieve this level of precision. Kiraxis finally set down her hammer and turned to face him. In the morning light, her scales had a warmer bronze tone, and her amber eyes seemed less intense than they had the night before. Your techniques are sound, but you lack the proper tools for high-precision work. Also, your forge runs too cool for optimal metal restructuring. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Emma's voice carried from the living area, not crying this time, but making the happy babbling sounds that meant she was awake and content. Marcus hurried to get her, finding the baby standing in her crib and bouncing excitedly when she saw him. "Morning, little star," he said, lifting Emma into his arms. "Ready to meet our new employee officially?" When they returned to the shop, Kiraxis was examining some of his other ongoing projects. She looked up as Emma let out an excited squeal upon seeing the dragon woman again. "She remembers you," Marcus observed. Young minds are remarkably adaptable. Unlike many adults, they see what is rather than what they expect to see. Emma immediately began reaching for Kiraxis, making demanding baby noises until the dragon woman cautiously approached. This time, Emma managed to grab one of the small horns protruding from Kiraxis's forehead, pulling herself forward with determination. "Careful," Marcus warned, but Kiraxis seemed unconcerned. "She cannot damage them. Dragon horns are quite resilient." Kiraxis gently freed her horn from Emma's grip, then extended her hand. Emma immediately grabbed 2 of the scaled fingers and began examining them intently, running tiny fingertips over the texture. "I should probably get some breakfast started," Marcus said. "You must be hungry after working all night." "I consumed field rations before beginning work, but I would appreciate observing human food preparation techniques." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Field rations? You carry military supplies?" Kiraxis hesitated. "Old habits. I previously served in a tactical capacity." Another piece of the puzzle. Marcus decided not to push for details. Everyone had reasons for leaving their past behind. In the small kitchen area, Marcus managed to prepare eggs and toast while keeping Emma entertained. She seemed fascinated by Kiraxis, constantly looking around Marcus's shoulder to stare at the dragon woman with wide eyes. "She's not usually this social," Marcus explained as he set out plates. "Most strangers make her shy." "Children often sense intent more clearly than adults," Kiraxis replied. "She understands that I mean no harm." As they ate, Marcus found himself studying his unexpected employee. Kiraxis ate efficiently but carefully, her clawed fingers handling the human utensils with surprising delicacy. She seemed to be analyzing everything around her. The construction of the building, the efficiency of his equipment layout, the quality of materials he used. "So what exactly did you do before coming here?" Marcus asked. "I was a combat engineer for the Draconic Confederation's Rapid Response Forces, specialized in battlefield repairs and equipment modification under hostile conditions." "Combat engineer," Marcus repeated. "That explains the precision work. But why leave? Seems like important work." Kiraxis was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes distant. "There was a mission. Civilian casualties occurred due to strategic decisions made by my commanding officers. I disagreed with those decisions, vocally. And that got you in trouble?" "Dragonfolk value order and hierarchy. Public dissent is not tolerated, even when the dissenter is technically correct." She looked directly at Marcus. "I chose exile rather than continued complicity." Marcus felt a stab of respect for the dragon woman. Standing up for principles at personal cost was something he understood. "That must have been difficult." "Less difficult than living with compromised honor," Kiraxis replied simply. Emma chose that moment to throw a piece of toast, which landed on Kiraxis's arm. Instead of being annoyed, the dragon woman examined the food with apparent interest. "Human infant feeding patterns are quite inefficient," she observed. Marcus laughed. "Tell me about it. She gets more food on herself and the furniture than in her mouth." Kiraxis carefully picked up the toast piece and handed it back to Emma, who immediately tried to stuff the entire thing in her mouth at once. This created a new problem as Emma began to choke slightly on the oversized bite. Moving with surprising speed, Caraxes gently turned Emma forward and supported her, while Marcus extracted the excess food. Emma coughed once, then looked up at both adults with a big, drooling smile as if nothing had happened. "Definitely Sarah's daughter," Marcus said with a mixture of pride and exasperation. "Fearless and stubborn." "Excellent survival traits," Caraxes agreed. A chime from Marcus's comm unit interrupted the moment. "Chen's repair," he answered. "Marcus, thank the stars you're open," came the harried voice of Colony Administrator Walsh. "We've got a major problem with the atmospheric processors. The backup units are failing, and we need immediate repairs or we'll lose life support in the residential sectors." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The atmospheric processors were critical systems that required specialized knowledge he wasn't sure he possessed. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 6 hours before air quality becomes dangerous." "Can you handle it?" Marcus looked at Caraxes, who was listening intently to the conversation. The dragon woman nodded slightly. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, Marcus said. After ending the call, Caraxes was already moving toward her tools. Atmospheric processing systems often suffer from cascade failures when backup units are improperly calibrated. The fix requires simultaneous work on multiple subsystems. You've dealt with this before, many times. Combat zones frequently require emergency life support repairs. She paused, looking at Emma, who was still contentedly gnawing on toast. "However, this work environment will be more pleasant." As they gathered tools and equipment, Marcus found himself grateful for whatever circumstances had brought Caraxes to his shop. The colony's survival might depend on her expertise. Emma babbled happily from her carrier as they prepared to leave, completely unaware that she was about to witness her first emergency repair mission. Marcus strapped the carrier to his chest and grabbed his toolkit. "Ready?" he asked Caraxes. The dragon woman spread her wings slightly, then folded them back. "Ready." As they headed toward the colony's central processing facility, Marcus realized that life on New Terra Colony had just become significantly more interesting. He just hoped they could keep everyone breathing long enough to figure out what came next. The atmospheric processing facility hummed with barely controlled chaos when Marcus and Caraxes arrived. Colony Administrator Walsh met them at the entrance, his usually neat appearance disheveled with worry. Behind him, several technicians huddled around displays showing increasingly red warning indicators. "Marcus, thank goodness," Walsh said, then stopped short when he saw Caraxes. Who is this?" "Caraxes, my new partner," Marcus replied simply. "She's the expert we need for this job." Walsh's eyes widened as he took in Caraxes' imposing form and folded wings. "Partner? Marcus, I don't think you understand the cultural implications of—" "Administrator Walsh," Caraxes interrupted, her deep voice cutting through his concerns. "Your atmospheric processors are failing due to resonance cascade in the molecular filtration arrays. We have approximately 5 hours and 37 minutes before air quality becomes dangerous for human children and elderly individuals. Would you prefer to discuss politics or preserve life?" Walsh blinked, clearly taken aback by her directness. "Right. Yes, the life support systems." Emma gurgled happily from her carrier, reaching toward the blinking lights on the control panels. Marcus adjusted her position so she could see everything while staying safely out of the way. Inside the facility, the scale of the problem became clear. 3 massive processing units lined the central chamber, each one responsible for cleaning and recycling air for thousands of colonists. 2 were completely offline, their displays dark except for red failure warnings. The third was struggling, its harmonics creating an ominous grinding sound that made Marcus's teeth ache. "Show me the maintenance logs," Caraxes commanded, and Marcus was impressed by how naturally she took charge. The technicians, initially wary of the dragon woman, quickly found themselves following her lead as she demonstrated expert knowledge of their systems. "Here," one technician said, pulling up holographic displays. "The failures started 3 days ago with minor efficiency drops, then cascaded this morning when we tried to bring the backup systems online." Caraxes studied the data streams, her amber eyes tracking multiple information flows simultaneously. "Your backup systems were installed incorrectly. The harmonic frequencies are fighting each other instead of working together. Every time you activate a backup, it destabilizes the primary units." "That's impossible," the lead technician protested. We followed manufacturer specifications exactly. Human specifications assume human operational parameters, Kyraxis replied patiently. You did not account for the resonance effects of your planetary magnetic field, which differs significantly from standard colonial magnetic environments. Marcus watched in fascination as Kyraxis began pulling access panels with practiced efficiency. Her clawed fingers, which seemed too large for delicate work, manipulated controls with surprising precision. Within minutes, she'd identified the exact points where the systems were interfering with each other. Marcus, I need you to recalibrate the primary filtration matrices while I realign the backup harmonic dampeners, she said. The procedures must be synchronized precisely. I'm not sure I know enough about, Marcus began. You know more than you realize. Trust your instincts and follow my guidance. Emma seemed to sense the tension in the room and began fussing slightly. Without thinking, Kyraxis began humming a low melodic sound that seemed to resonate through the chamber. The baby immediately calmed, staring up at the dragon woman with wide, fascinated eyes. Dragon lullabies work on human infants? Marcus asked as he worked to access the filtration controls. Sound is universal, Kyraxis replied. The frequencies that soothe young creatures are similar across many species. As they worked, Marcus found himself falling into a rhythm with Kyraxis that felt surprisingly natural. She called out adjustments and he implemented them, their movements coordinating as if they'd been working together for years instead of hours. The other technicians watched in amazement as systems that had been failing for days began responding to their repairs. Filtration matrix online, Marcus announced. Harmonic dampeners aligned, Kyraxis confirmed. Activating backup systems in sequence 3, 2, 1. The change was immediate and dramatic. The grinding noise faded away, replaced by the smooth hum of properly functioning machinery. Warning lights shifted from red to amber to green across all 3 processing units. Air quality readings began improving within minutes. Incredible, Administrator Walsh breathed. How did you know how to fix this? Kyraxis was checking readings on multiple displays simultaneously. Combat engineering requires understanding how systems interact under stress. These processors were experiencing combat-level stress from harmonic interference. Emma chose that moment to let out a happy squeal and clap her tiny hands, as if celebrating their success. The sound echoed through the chamber, and Marcus saw several of the technicians smile despite their exhaustion. There's one more issue, Kyraxis said, her expression growing serious. These repairs are temporary. Your entire atmospheric processing system needs redesign to account for local planetary conditions. Without proper modifications, you will experience similar failures within 6 months. Redesign the entire system? Walsh looked overwhelmed. We don't have the resources for that kind of project. Actually, we might, Marcus said slowly, an idea forming. Kyraxis, what if we upgraded the systems gradually? Replace components during routine maintenance with improved versions that account for the planetary variables? Kyraxis considered this feasible. It would require fabricating custom components with specific harmonic properties. The work would be complex but manageable with proper planning. And we could do this work at my shop, Marcus continued. Create replacement parts in advance, then install them during scheduled maintenance periods. No disruption to colony operations. Administrator Walsh looked between them with growing hope. You're talking about a long-term contract. Ongoing work to upgrade our critical systems. I'm talking about making this place safer for everyone who lives here, Marcus replied, instinctively adjusting Emma's carrier, including the next generation. Emma babbled agreement and reached toward Kyraxis again. This time, the dragon woman didn't hesitate to extend her hand, letting the baby grab her scaled fingers with both tiny fists. Your offspring approves of this plan, Kyraxis observed with what might have been amusement. One of the technicians, a young woman named Sarah who reminded Marcus painfully of his late wife, approached them hesitantly. Excuse me, but could you show us how you diagnose the harmonic interference? We've been struggling with minor resonance issues in other systems. Kyraxis straightened slightly, and Marcus realized she was pleased by the request. The key is understanding that all mechanical systems create acoustic signatures. When those signatures conflict, efficiency drops and failures cascade. For the next hour, Kyraxis conducted an impromptu training session, teaching the colony technicians diagnostic techniques that had clearly been developed through years of emergency repairs under impossible conditions. Marcus found himself learning as much as anyone else, impressed by both her knowledge and her patience in sharing it. Emma fell asleep in her carrier during the technical discussion, lulled by the combination of Kyraxis's humming and the steady sound of properly functioning machinery. When the training session ended, Administrator Walsh approached Marcus privately. "Marcus, I need to ask," Walsh said quietly. "Are you sure about this partnership? Dragonfolk don't usually integrate well with human communities. There could be complications." Marcus looked at Kyraxis, who was still answering technical questions from enthusiastic technicians. Then he looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully against his chest with a small smile on her face. "Administrator, 3 months ago I was barely keeping my head above water, trying to run a business, raise a baby, and deal with systems that were too complex for one person to handle properly." Marcus adjusted Emma's blanket gently. "Today we prevented a colony-wide life support failure and potentially solved our long-term infrastructure problems. If that's what complications look like, I'll take them." Walsh nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But there will be questions from some of the colonists. Dragonfolk have a reputation for being aloof, superior." Marcus watched as Kyraxis patiently demonstrated a diagnostic technique for the 3rd time to a technician who was struggling to understand. She left her entire civilization behind because she wouldn't compromise her principles. Spent all night fixing equipment for people she'd never met. And she's been helping me take care of Emma like it's the most natural thing in the world. He met Walsh's eyes. "I think our colony will be lucky to have her." As they prepared to leave the facility, Marcus realized something had fundamentally changed. This morning he'd been a widower struggling to maintain his business and raise his daughter. Now he was part of a partnership that might transform how the entire colony maintained its critical systems. Emma stirred as they walked back toward the shop, opening sleepy eyes and looking around with curiosity. When she saw Kyraxis walking beside them, she made a happy cooing sound and reached out with one small hand. Without hesitation, Kyraxis gently took the tiny fingers in her scaled palm, and Emma held on contentedly as they made their way home through the morning light. 2 weeks into their partnership, Marcus was beginning to understand that hiring Kyraxis had changed everything about his life in ways he hadn't expected. The shop had transformed from a simple repair facility into something approaching a technological marvel, with improvements appearing daily as Kyraxis identified inefficiencies and implemented solutions. She'd rebuilt his forge to operate at temperatures that made his previous work seem primitive. The acoustic dampening she'd installed meant Emma could sleep peacefully even when they were working on noisy projects. Most surprisingly, Kyraxis had constructed a specialized workstation at exactly the right height for someone carrying a baby, allowing Marcus to continue detailed work while keeping Emma close. This morning brought their biggest challenge yet. Marcus stood outside the colony's main power facility, reading the technical specifications on his tablet, while Emma explored his tool bag with characteristic enthusiasm. Beside them, Kyraxis studied architectural diagrams with an intensity that suggested she was planning a military operation. "The fusion reactor has been running at 60% efficiency for 3 years, Marcus explained to her. "Previous repair attempts have only provided temporary improvements. Human fusion reactors are built for stability rather than performance," Kyraxis replied. "Your designs prioritize safety margins over optimal energy output." "Safety margins keep people alive," Marcus pointed out. "Of course. But there are ways to maintain safety while improving performance. The key is understanding harmonic resonance at the quantum level." Marcus had learned not to question Kyraxis's technical claims. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd demonstrated knowledge that sometimes seemed to border on the impossible. Her improvements to colony systems had saved them more energy and resources than anyone had thought achievable. Emma babbled happily and held up a wrench she'd extracted from the tool bag, looking proud of her discovery. Marcus gently took it back and handed her a safer rubber tool designed for teething babies. "Before we go in," Marcus said, "I should probably warn you that Chief Engineer Morrison isn't exactly diplomatic. He's been running this reactor for 15 years and doesn't like outside suggestions. Engineers who refuse to learn new techniques often become obstacles to progress," Kyraxis observed. "But I will attempt to be patient." The reactor facility was the most heavily secured building in the colony, with multiple checkpoints and safety protocols. Marcus had clearance from his previous maintenance work, but bringing Caraxes required special authorization from Administrator Walsh. The guards seemed nervous about allowing a dragonfolk into their most sensitive facility. Chief Engineer Morrison met them at the reactor chamber entrance, his weathered face showing obvious skepticism. He was a stocky man in his 60s, with grease-stained coveralls and the confident bearing of someone who'd spent decades working with dangerous technology. "Chen, I hope you know what you're doing," Morrison said, pointedly looking at Caraxes. "This isn't a place for experiments." "Chief Morrison, this is Caraxes, my partner," Marcus replied diplomatically. "She has extensive experience with fusion systems." "Experience with dragon fusion systems," Morrison corrected. "Human technology works differently." Caraxes stepped forward slightly, her amber eyes meeting Morrison's stare calmly. "Chief Engineer, may I examine your primary containment field specifications?" "Those are classified," Morrison said immediately. "Of course. However, I can determine their characteristics by observing the reactor's acoustic signature." Caraxes tilted her head slightly, listening to sounds Marcus couldn't detect. "Your containment field is oscillating at 2.7 terahertz with harmonic distortions at 847 and 1693 gigahertz. The distortions are causing approximately 23% efficiency loss and will lead to field collapse within 18 months if not corrected." Morrison's expression shifted from skepticism to shock. "How could you possibly know that?" "Dragonfolk hearing extends into frequency ranges humans cannot perceive. I am listening to your reactor's distress signals." Emma made a pleased sound and reached toward the large display screen showing reactor status. The colorful readouts seemed to fascinate her, and she babbled as if trying to communicate with the complex machinery. "Even your offspring recognizes harmonic patterns," Caraxes noted with approval. Over the next hour, Marcus watched Caraxes systematically identify problems that Morrison and his team had struggled with for years. She diagnosed containment field instabilities, plasma flow irregularities, and magnetic bottle distortions with an accuracy that left the human engineers speechless. "The primary issue is resonance cascade between your containment fields and the reactor chambers. Structural harmonics," Caraxes explained, her clawed fingers dancing over control interfaces designed for human hands. "Your reactor is essentially fighting itself." "That's impossible," Morrison protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "We've run comprehensive diagnostics. Human diagnostics operate within human sensory ranges." "You cannot hear what I hear." Caraxes demonstrated by producing a low humming sound that seemed to resonate through the chamber. Several warning indicators flickered on the status displays. "Your reactor responds to acoustic input because the containment field itself is acoustic in nature at quantum frequencies." Marcus found himself translating between the two engineers as Caraxes explained modifications that could improve efficiency while maintaining safety margins. Her solutions were elegant but complex, requiring precision manufacturing techniques that would challenge even their improved shop capabilities. Emma grew fussy during the technical discussions, so Marcus stepped away to feed her, while Caraxes and Morrison worked through the mathematical models. When he returned, he found Morrison studying holographic projections with obvious fascination. "She's right," Morrison admitted quietly. "Every calculation checks out. But implementing these modifications would require completely rebuilding the harmonic dampening systems." "Not rebuilding," Caraxes corrected. "Upgrading. The existing framework can be enhanced with properly tuned resonance amplifiers and quantum acoustic feedback loops." "And you can fabricate these components?" Morrison asked skeptically. Caraxes looked at Marcus, who nodded confidently. "We can fabricate them. It will require some new equipment, but the principles are sound." Emma chose that moment to spit up slightly on Marcus's shirt, prompting him to search for cleaning supplies. Morrison surprisingly produced a pack of cleaning wipes from his toolkit. "Grandfather of 4, Morrison explained. "You learn to be prepared." "How do they react to dragonfolk?" Caraxes asked with apparent curiosity. Morrison considered the question seriously. "They probably would have been fascinated like this little one. Kids don't see differences the way adults do." As they prepared to leave the reactor facility, Morrison pulled Marcus aside. "Chen, I owe you an apology. I thought you were taking unnecessary risks bringing her here. But if she can really deliver on these improvements, we're talking about solving problems that have plagued this colony since day one." "She delivers," Marcus assured him. "Everything she's promised, she's exceeded." There's one more thing, Morrison said quietly. Administrator Walsh mentioned there might be political complications with having dragonfolk in the colony. Some of the older colonists remember the border wars when dragonfolk forces were less than friendly to human settlements. Marcus felt a chill. Caraxes mentioned she left military service, but she never said anything about fighting humans. Most dragonfolk military units didn't engage human forces directly, Morrison continued. But there were incidents. Civilian casualties during territorial disputes. Some people here might remember those stories. Marcus looked through the facility windows at Caraxes, who was examining external reactor components while Emma watched from her carrier. The dragon woman moved with obvious military precision, but everything he'd observed suggested someone committed to protecting rather than harming civilian populations. Chief Morrison, has she done anything since arriving that suggests she's dangerous to colonists? Morrison thought for a moment. No. If anything, she's been more concerned about safety protocols than most of my own staff. But perception isn't always based on reality. As they walked back to the shop, Marcus found himself studying Caraxes with new questions. Emma seemed completely comfortable with the dragon woman, reaching for her scaled hands and babbling contentedly whenever Caraxes hummed her strange lullabies. But Marcus realized there were still significant gaps in what he knew about his partner's background. Caraxes, he said carefully. Chief Morrison mentioned that some colonists might have concerns about dragonfolk military history. Is there anything I should know about your service record? Caraxes was quiet for several steps, her wings folding tighter against her back. I never engaged human civilian targets, she said finally. But I was present during conflicts where such engagements occurred. My opposition to those actions led to my exile. What kind of conflicts? Border disputes over mineral rights in contested systems. Military commanders sometimes chose expedient solutions over ethical ones. Her amber eyes met his. I refused to participate in operations that targeted non-combatants. This made me unreliable in the eyes of my superiors. Marcus felt some of his concern ease. So you left because you wouldn't hurt civilians? I left because I discovered that honor and military efficiency are not always compatible. Your daughter will grow up in a universe where such choices matter. Emma gurgled agreement and waved enthusiastically at a passing maintenance robot, apparently approving of the conversation's direction. Marcus found himself smiling despite the serious nature of their discussion. Well, he said, if anyone asks, they can judge you by your actions here rather than military history. Actions are all that truly matter, Caraxes agreed. Words and intentions fade. What we build together will endure. As they reached the shop, Marcus realized that building something enduring was exactly what they were doing, creating solutions that would benefit the colony for generations. Whatever political complications might arise, he was confident they could face them together. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning when Marcus arrived at the shop to find 3 colony security officers waiting outside. Emma was having a particularly good day, babbling happily and waving at everyone she saw, but the serious expressions on the officers' faces suggested this wasn't a social visit. Marcus Chen? The lead officer asked, a stern woman named Lieutenant Rodriguez, whom Marcus knew from previous security clearance renewals. That's me, Marcus replied, shifting Emma's carrier to a more comfortable position. What can I do for you? We need to speak with you about your business partner. There have been some concerns raised about having a dragonfolk with unrestricted colony access. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. What kind of concerns? Security concerns, Rodriguez replied carefully. We've received reports that she's been accessing sensitive facilities and examining critical infrastructure without proper oversight. She's been fixing critical infrastructure, Marcus corrected, with full authorization from Administrator Walsh and the facility chiefs. That may be true, but some colonists are worried about her true intentions. Dragonfolk have sophisticated intelligence-gathering capabilities, and her military background raises questions. Before Marcus could respond, Caraxes emerged from the shop's rear entrance, carrying a toolkit and wearing work coveralls that had been modified to accommodate her wings. Emma immediately perked up and made excited baby noises upon seeing her. Good morning, Marcus, Caraxes said, then nodded politely to the security officers. Officers, is there a problem with our scheduled maintenance work today? Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped forward. Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions about your activities since arriving at New Terra Colony. Certainly, Caraxes replied calmly. What would you like to know? For starters, what was your exact position in the Draconic Confederation military? Combat engineer, 3rd class, specializing in rapid infrastructure repair and battlefield technology adaptation. I served for 12 years before requesting discharge. Requested discharge or forced resignation? Another officer interjected. Kyraxis's amber eyes flashed briefly. I submitted formal objections to mission parameters that violated non-combatant protection protocols. When those objections were ignored, I requested transfer to non-combat positions. When that request was denied, I chose exile rather than continued participation in operations I considered ethically compromised. Emma made a fussing sound and reached toward Kyraxis, who automatically extended her hand for the baby to grab. The simple, natural gesture seemed to defuse some of the tension. Look, Marcus said, if you have specific concerns about security, let's address them directly. What exactly do you think Kyraxis is doing wrong? Lieutenant Rodriguez consulted her tablet. Colonist Peterson claims she was seen examining the colony's defensive systems without authorization. Colonist Williams says she's been asking detailed questions about our communication arrays. And Engineer Morrison reported that she identified classified reactor specifications through undisclosed methods. Peterson doesn't know the difference between maintenance and espionage, Marcus replied with growing frustration. Kyraxis was checking the defensive systems for harmonic interference that was affecting the nearby residential areas. Williams asked her about communication problems he's been having for months. And Morrison was impressed by her diagnostic capabilities, not concerned about them. The point is, Rodriguez continued, we have a dragonfolk with military intelligence training accessing our most sensitive facilities. Some colonists are nervous about what information she might be gathering. Kyraxis straightened slightly, her wings shifting in what Marcus had learned was a sign of controlled anger. Lieutenant Rodriguez, what specific information do you believe I am gathering? And for what purpose? I couldn't speculate about. Then allow me to clarify, Kyraxis interrupted, her deep voice taking on a formal tone that suggested military training. If I intended to gather intelligence about your colony's capabilities, I would require approximately 6 hours to identify every defensive weakness, communication vulnerability, and infrastructure failure point you possess. I would not spend 3 weeks repairing your equipment and training your technicians to maintain it properly. The officers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with her directness. Emma, oblivious to the tension, had managed to grab one of Kyraxis's small horns and was making happy gurgling sounds. Furthermore, Kyraxis continued, gently freeing her horn from Emma's grasp. If the Draconic Confederation had any interest in New Terra Colony, they would not send a single exile with repair tools. They would send a battle group with plasma cannons. That's not exactly reassuring, Rodriguez said. It should be, Marcus interjected, because it means Kyraxis chose to come here for personal reasons, not military ones. She could be anywhere in the galaxy, but she's here helping us fix air processors and power systems. Administrator Walsh's voice crackled from Marcus's comm unit. Chen, are you available? We have an emergency situation at the water treatment facility. Marcus activated the unit. What kind of emergency? Complete system failure. We're looking at water shortage within 48 hours if we can't get it online. I need your team down here immediately. Rodriguez held up her hand. Mr. Chen, we're not finished with— Yes, we are, Marcus said firmly. The colony has a water emergency and we're the only ones who can fix it. Your security concerns can wait until everyone has clean drinking water. As they gathered emergency repair equipment, Kyraxis worked with efficient precision that reminded Marcus of her military background. But instead of gathering intelligence, she was preparing to save the colony from a potentially catastrophic infrastructure failure. The water treatment facility was in worse condition than the atmospheric processors had been. Primary filtration systems were completely offline, backup purification units were failing, and contamination levels were rising steadily. Without immediate repairs, the colony would need to implement water rationing within hours. How bad is it? Marcus asked the facility supervisor, an anxious-looking man named Santos. Bad, Santos replied. We think it started with a cascade failure in the molecular filtration array, but the damage spread to secondary systems before we could contain it. Kyraxis was already examining diagnostic displays, her enhanced hearing allowing her to identify problems that weren't visible to human senses. The failure originated in harmonic feedback between your filtration systems and the underground water pumps, she announced. The resonance created microfractures in critical components. Can you fix it? Santos asked desperately. We can fix it, Marcus assured him, but it's going to require some creative solutions. Over the next 12 hours, Marcus watched Caraxes perform what could only be described as engineering miracles. She fabricated replacement components using materials that weren't designed for water treatment, created temporary filtration systems using equipment from completely different facilities, and coordinated repairs that required precise timing across multiple interconnected systems. Emma slept through most of the emergency, worn out from the excitement of being carried around the colony in her portable crib. When she woke, she seemed to sense the urgency around her and remained unusually quiet, as if understanding that the adults needed to focus. By evening, clean water was flowing through the colony's distribution system again. Santos and his team looked exhausted but relieved as they watched the final systems come back online. I don't know how you did it, Santos told Caraxes gratefully. We've been struggling with efficiency problems for months, and you solved them in addition to fixing the main failure. Efficient systems are more reliable systems, Caraxes replied simply. Prevention is preferable to emergency repair. As they cleaned up their equipment, Lieutenant Rodriguez appeared with the same security officers from that morning, but her expression had changed significantly. Ms. Caraxes, she said formally, I owe you an apology. While you were addressing our security concerns, the colony almost lost water service. Your actions today probably saved lives. Probably, Caraxes asked with what might have been amusement. Definitely saved lives, Rodriguez corrected. And I think anyone watching you work today would understand that your commitment is to protecting this colony, not gathering intelligence about it. Emma chose that moment to wake up and immediately reach for Caraxes, making demanding baby noises until the dragon woman picked her up. Caraxes held the baby with practiced ease, and Emma settled contentedly against her scaled shoulder. Children understand intent more clearly than adults, Caraxes observed, gently supporting Emma's back. She trusts because she senses no deception. Rodriguez nodded. The colonists who raised concerns weren't necessarily wrong to be cautious, but they were wrong about your character. As they walked back to the shop under the light of 3 moons, Marcus found himself reflecting on the day's events. The security investigation had been stressful, but it had also demonstrated something important about Caraxes' place in the colony. Do you think there will be more problems? He asked. There will always be those who fear what they do not understand, Caraxes replied, adjusting Emma's position as the baby dozed against her shoulder. But fear diminishes when people see actions rather than assumptions. Emma made a soft sleeping sound and snuggled closer to Caraxes, completely secure in the dragon woman's arms. Marcus realized that his daughter had understood something about their partner, long before the adults had figured it out. She trusts you completely, he observed. Trust is earned through consistency, Caraxes said softly. Your offspring has observed my actions for weeks and reached her own conclusions. Marcus smiled as they approached the shop. Emma's always been a good judge of character. I should have listened to her from the beginning. The lights of their workshop gleamed warmly in the darkness, a beacon of safety and productivity in the frontier night. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Marcus was confident they could face them as a family. 6 months later, Marcus stood in what had once been his modest repair shop and marveled at the transformation. The facility now sprawled across 3 connected buildings, with specialized workshops for different types of manufacturing and repair. Advanced diagnostic equipment hummed quietly in climate-controlled chambers, while the main fabrication area showcased precision tools that could create components to tolerances he'd never imagined possible. Emma, now 14 months old and walking with determined wobbles, explored the shop floor with fearless curiosity. She'd grown up thinking it was perfectly normal for a dragon woman to be part of daily life, and her vocabulary included words like kirkir. For Caraxes and wrench delivered in a tone that suggested mechanical repair was humanity's highest calling. The delegation from Kepler Colony will arrive this afternoon, Caraxes announced, reviewing their schedule on a holographic display. They're particularly interested in our atmospheric processing improvements. Marcus nodded, checking Emma's position to make sure she wasn't getting into anything dangerous. That's the 4th colony this month wanting to license our designs. Administrator Walsh says we're becoming famous. Reputation based on results is valuable, Caraxes agreed, though I suspect the real attraction is our safety record. 0 system failures in 6 months tends to generate attention. The morning brought their usual mix of routine maintenance and complex problem-solving. Marcus worked on a harvester's power coupling, while Caraxes fabricated replacement parts for the colony's communication array. Emma had claimed a corner of the workshop as her personal domain, complete with baby-safe tools and a miniature workbench that Caraxes had crafted for her. The partnership, that had begun with desperate necessity, had evolved into something neither Marcus nor Caraxes had expected. Their technical capabilities complemented each other perfectly. Marcus's intuitive understanding of practical engineering problems combined with Caraxes's theoretical knowledge and enhanced sensory abilities to create solutions that consistently exceeded expectations. More importantly, they'd become a family in ways that went far beyond professional collaboration. Emma had 2 parents who adored her, even if one of them was a 7-foot dragon woman with glowing amber eyes. Caraxes had found a purpose that aligned with her principles, while Marcus had discovered that partnership could be more fulfilling than he'd ever experienced working alone. Marcus, Caraxes said, looking up from her fabrication work, I've been considering our conversation about expanding operations. The manufacturing facility idea? Yes. We could establish a dedicated production center for colony infrastructure components, standardized designs that account for local planetary variables, manufactured to specifications that eliminate common failure points. Marcus considered this while adjusting a calibration that was giving him trouble. It would mean hiring additional staff, training them in your techniques. Our techniques, Caraxes corrected gently. Your innovations have been as important as mine. Emma wandered over to Marcus, holding up a plastic wrench and babbling something that might have been a technical question. He picked her up and she immediately began pointing at his work, apparently offering assistance. Think she's going to follow in our footsteps? Marcus asked. She already demonstrates excellent spatial reasoning and tool recognition, Caraxes observed. Also persistence and attention to detail. Definitely Sarah's daughter, Marcus said softly, then smiled. Though she's picked up your methodical approach to problem solving. The shop's communication system chimed with an incoming priority message. Administrator Walsh's image appeared on the main display, and his expression suggested important news. Marcus Caraxes, I need to speak with you both immediately. We've received a communication from the Draconic Confederation Embassy. Marcus felt a chill of concern. What kind of communication? They're requesting information about Caraxes' current status and activities. Apparently, her work here has attracted attention from her former superiors. Caraxes had gone very still, her amber eyes fixed on the display. What specific information are they requesting? Her employment status, residence location, and a summary of her technical activities. They claim it's routine monitoring of exiled personnel, but Walsh paused. They also mentioned that recent improvements to colonial infrastructure systems suggest unauthorized transfer of strategic technologies. Unauthorized? Marcus felt his protective instincts flare. She's been sharing her knowledge to help civilian populations. How is that unauthorized? The Confederation apparently considers certain engineering techniques to be state secrets, Walsh replied. They're implying that Caraxes may have violated the terms of her exile. Caraxes finally spoke, her voice carefully controlled. Administrator Walsh, please inform the embassy that my current activities are purely civilian in nature and involve no military applications. I am employed as a repair technician and am sharing only basic engineering principles. I'll pass that along, but they're also requesting an in-person inspection. They want to send a representative to evaluate your work directly. Emma, sensing the tension in the room, made a soft, worried sound and reached toward Caraxes. Without hesitation, the dragon woman lifted the baby into her arms, providing comfort while receiving it. When would this inspection occur? Caraxes asked. They're requesting permission to send a ship within 2 weeks. As a sovereign human colony, we have the right to refuse, but Walsh looked uncomfortable. It might be diplomatically unwise to deny their request entirely. Marcus felt anger building as he considered the implications. So they're threatening diplomatic consequences if we don't let them harass Caraxes? It's not quite that simple, Walsh replied. But the Confederation has significant influence in this sector. If they chose to make things difficult for our trade relationships, Then we find another way, Marcus said firmly. Caraxes isn't going anywhere. She's part of this colony now. Caraxes looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Marcus, you don't understand the political implications. If the Confederation believes I've violated exile protocols, they could demand my return for trial. For what? Fixing water treatment plants and air processors? For sharing military engineering techniques with human populations? They could classify my activities as intelligence collaboration. Emma babbled something and patted Caraxes' cheek gently, as if offering reassurance. The simple gesture seemed to steady the dragon woman's composure. There may be a solution, Caraxes said slowly. If my work here is formally recognized as humanitarian assistance rather than technical transfer, it changes the legal classification significantly. How do we make that happen? Walsh asked. We document everything, Marcus suggested. Show that our improvements have been focused on safety and efficiency, not military applications. Demonstrate that we're helping civilian populations, not building weapons or defensive systems. Caraxes nodded thoughtfully. Additionally, if other human colonies adopt our techniques and achieve similar safety improvements, it establishes a pattern of humanitarian benefit rather than strategic advantage. The delegations that have been visiting, Marcus realized, they're not just interested in licensing our designs, they're proof that our work helps everyone. Exactly. And if we can demonstrate that our techniques improve life quality across multiple human settlements, the Confederation will find it difficult to classify the knowledge as strategically sensitive. Emma chose that moment to reach toward Marcus's workbench and babble something that sounded remarkably like "fix it," pointing at the project he'd been working on. The adults couldn't help smiling despite the seriousness of their conversation. She's right, Marcus said. That's what we do. We fix things, make them work better and safer. Indeed, Caraxes agreed, and we will continue to fix things regardless of political complications. Over the following days, they prepared for the Confederation inspection with characteristic thoroughness. Documentation was compiled, safety records were reviewed, and testimonials were gathered from every colony that had benefited from their innovations. The evidence painted a clear picture of humanitarian engineering focused on civilian welfare. Emma seemed to sense the importance of their preparations, staying unusually close to both Marcus and Caraxes and offering her plastic tools whenever they appeared stressed. Her presence reminded them daily of what they were really protecting, not just their partnership or their business, but the future they were building together. The night before the inspection, Marcus found Caraxes standing outside the shop, looking up at the stars with Emma sleeping peacefully in her arms. The baby had developed a habit of falling asleep against Caraxes' shoulder, lulled by the dragon woman's gentle humming. Worried, Marcus asked, joining them in the cool evening air. Concerned, Caraxes corrected, but not for myself. Your daughter should not grow up in a universe where helping others is considered politically dangerous. Marcus looked down at Emma, who was dreaming peacefully despite the adult anxieties surrounding her. She's growing up in a universe where a dragon woman and a human mechanic can save entire colonies by working together. That's the lesson she'll remember. And that lesson will shape how she approaches problems for the rest of her life, Caraxes added softly.